Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Meeta and I'm joined by our special guest today, Jo Ellen. Hi, Jo Ellen.
Hi. Lovely to be. It's been a while, so it's lovely to be back with you.
Thank you. It's good to have you back at the main event.
And what a subject this is.
Indeed. So today we are talking all about stress in the workplace. While everyone's settling in, I can let you know that in the year to date, this is our biggest sign up. This is a big issue, and that's why we've been allocated a month of national stress awareness rather than a day like some topics. I don't even think a month's enough, is it, Jo Ellen?
No, it isn't, because it's ongoing. I mean, the thing, and you and I were talking about this before we went live, is that we need stress. I mean, I need stress. I always bite off more than I can chew. And that somehow is my motivation, and I get my creative juices going, and I think, oh, how am I going to handle all of this? And I do. But it's knowing just where your point is. And we'll get to that, won't we?
Yeah. Somebody described stress to me as a spark plug. They said it's like a car. A spark plug's only job is to get the car started. After that, all the responsibility and the work is done in the engine. In a human being, stress is a spark plug. But if we're running on stress, that's not good. And I think that's what we're going to talk about today, is where stress is a good thing and when we are starting to experience the signs where stress is becoming overwhelming. So just a quick bit of housekeeping while everybody jumps in. We've got about 30 to 40 minutes. We like to keep these succinct. We know everyone's time is precious. We also want to make our sessions as interactive as possible. The main event is for you. It's for you to take away something that you can apply immediately in your workplace or that impacts you personally, and you can think, okay, I've got that sorted. So Joellen and I are here for 30 to 40 minutes, but also if there's something you don't want to discuss in our chat box, then please feel free to reach out to us outside of this platform. I'm just going to quickly say a quick hello to you all from our chat box. You can see how easy it is to give us your comments. So I'm just reaching out and saying hi to everyone. Give us the hi, let us know you're there. And also, a little bit of work for everyone to do. We've got a poll. So our poll is asking today what your most common stress trigger is. And I mean, I think a stress trigger is something that makes you go from 0 to 100, right, Joella? Like, how would you describe a trigger?
Well, a trigger, I mean, I use this analogy, and we do it on some of our, time management courses. This is a classic think of a pot, and I call it a stress pot. And it's the stuff that goes in, the shopping list, driving this one to that one, coming into work, dealing with a deadline, and it all nicely bubbles and it simmers away.
Yeah.
And that's the healthy pot that we have of our lives, basically. But we could turn up the heat, and the heat might be close deadlines that you didn't know was going to happen, conflict that you weren't expecting, more demands, and then it's too much stuff going into the pot. So last night I was in a meeting, and then all of a sudden my lights went out, everything just went, and it turned out my central heating died. But it was like, oh, the stress pot just went poof.
Yeah. And sometimes it can be too many things. On the other times, it can be that one thing you don't like doing. And because you know it's coming, it just builds up this, huge sort of energy drain in your body. You just don't feel like yourself. Well, we've got five different options for the stress trigger in the poll. I very much doubt, I'd be surprised if so far everyone has ticked on being pulled in too many directions, because currently that's 100% of the results. The other options, should you care to think about whether that's your trigger, miscommunication. So where you've spoken to somebody, they're not listening, they're hearing what they want to hear, you're saying what you want to say, and it's just, it's not worked. That piece of communication hasn't worked. Or deadlines, when you know something's coming and you've got to get it done and you're not there yet. Being pulled in too many directions, well, that kind of speaks for itself. That's exactly Jo Ellen's, example of the pot being overflowing. And I didn't turn the sound off my phone. And management, the boss, breathing down your neck, or are you the boss? Are you stressed out with your people? And and conflict. So actual disagreement. So as you're jumping in, please pop over to the poll and give us your thoughts. Quite interestingly, so far, everyone has put being pulled in too many directions. If you've got any problems with the poll, just let us know in the chat box. But otherwise, it looks like that's 100% of our delegates so
really
far.
Interesting, isn't it?
Saying that, yeah.
You know, we again on our time management course, we actually have people spinning plates. We've got someone who used to be a gymnast and a clown, and so you actually have the experience of that. And being pulled in too many directions is like the plate spinning, and how difficult that is just as an exercise. But it is, where do I put my attention? Where are my priorities? And I think when you lose sight of your priorities, that's a real stress trigger as well. One of the things we didn't include on here, because it comes and goes, is the frustration and stress around technology. But it isn't, you know, it's not necessarily a trigger. It's just, I think all of us, particularly over these last 2.5 years, have experienced so much stress with new technology. But it's a different kind of, I don't want to say it's exciting stress. Sometimes it's frustrating, but it's a necessary stress. Whereas I think some of the things that really are our triggers just go in deeper, you know.
Yeah, and it's interesting that the poll and the room today are talking about being pulled in too many directions, because I often think that when it's an objective that we've got to deal with, like a deadline, like, you know, a meeting or something like that, we can usually manage it in our minds, we can reprioritize. But it's when everything comes at us at once, when people pulling, you know, especially, you know, since we started working at home, we've had a real benefit of flexibility. And we would look at that as a de-stressing situation where there's less commuting, less hustling for a seat on the train, less pushing on the tube. But actually, people have not been able to delineate between the beginning and the end of work.
I think that's a key, isn't it?
Yeah, they're present and they've got the children asking for something, the husband asking for something, the wife, the dog, you know, all of a sudden you go to the office, it's a different environment, you know, you're used to being at home, and all of a sudden just this geographical shift and the demands on you, just it becomes overwhelming. You can tell that's definitely the box I tick as well. But let's go into this a little bit more. Let's go into talking about signs of stress in the workplace. Like, so we've got 4 areas we're going to cover. We'd love your questions throughout, your comments and your questions throughout. And thanks for saying hi, everyone. Starting with acknowledging stress in the workplace, we're going to move into how we would support our teams, coping methods, tools and techniques to build resilience, and finishing off with how a wellbeing culture can be cultivated in an organization. So, right, let's start with the signs. What would you say, Jo Ellen? What do you think is the first sign?
They're this long. The signs are, first off, any change that you see. So someone looks tired or someone looks hyper. You know, if there's some kind of physical change in the way that someone is behaving. Short-tempered. I used to be like that. For some reason, that seems to have disappeared. My stress doesn't make me short-tempered. Okay. But for a lot of people, they're snappy. They're like impatient. Illness. A lack of concentration. So in overwhelm. A real sense of overwhelm. And something you and I talked about earlier, which is a common one for me, brain fog.
Yes.
What words am I thinking? I can't even conjure up a word sometimes. Forget it coming out of my mouth mangled. I really struggle. And I have been under a lot of stress recently, both in home and husband and illness and all sorts of things going on. And I have found this last 2 weeks, use your words, dear. I don't know where they are. They've disappeared.
Yeah, I hear you. And I think we, as an employee or an employer or in a workplace, we have this self-created stress where we have to look 100% of the time. We have to look busy, we have to be working, we have to show our value, we have to be available, we have to be positive. And all of that, if it's not congruent with where we are in ourselves, takes a lot of energy, and that then adds stress to us. And I think what is important for all of us in a working environment, I think one of the signs is when people withdraw.
Yes.
You know, when they
say depression as well is
yeah,
a good sign. Yeah, withdrawal.
They don't want to speak as much in a meeting. They don't really want to talk about the challenges they're feeling. Oh, it's fine. Almost a little bit defeatist. And I'm not saying that they are defeatist, but their mannerisms become dropped shoulders, head to the side. It's okay. It doesn't matter. They start to feel less. They value themselves less, and therefore, Matilda's saying their brain fog. Absolutely, Matilda. It is real. It is real. I'm having it today. This is. I sadly lost my mum a few weeks ago, and the team and everyone were great. They supported me, and I had all the time that I needed. And then I wanted to get back in because I knew that there wasn't more I could do, just sort of sitting around waiting for something to change. That's not how it was going to happen for me. But I came back to work. But could I put a sentence together? I thought, God, I'm a bit of a liability. But we give each other that support, don't we? So all of that, and actually some of the other things that happen in a workplace is there starts to become a bit of unrest in the team. So cultural behaviours shift. People start to become a little bit secretive. They start to talk to each other. Oh, have you noticed? You know, we have a very open policy structure in our world, and we always say that there's no secrets. Obviously, there's structure and strategy, but we always can talk as openly as we can with everyone. But sometimes in organizations, when people are feeling that it's hard and they might not want to talk to their boss because they're feeling they won't be listened to, then what ends up happening is that they talk to their peers, and then that can sometimes become a bit like Chinese whispers. Yeah. It's not solution led, but sometimes people aren't ready to talk about it. Yeah, Matilda has actually asked a question, a very good question, actually. So the difference between stress and burnout.
So burnout to me is the culmination of stress that's not been handled. Is that you've ignored it, you've made it okay, you've still tried to cope, and then there's the point at which you can't do it anymore. And often that's when you might get ill. I mean, you hear so often, oh, they've been signed off for stress.
Yeah,
that's because the steps that could have been taken beforehand weren't taken either by the employer or by the employee.
Yeah.
And you reach burnout where actually you can't function anymore.
Yeah. And quite interestingly, burnout has symptoms where, as we said, you can't function. You literally can't turn on your computer. No. You can't get out of bed. Yeah. So sometimes people can be on the path to burnout and start to notice, listen to your body, listen to the signs, value yourself. It's not, oh, it's just a bad day. Oh, it's just a bad, situation. When you're feeling overwhelmed, when you're feeling tired, when you find your temper is short or your attention span just isn't there, this is your stress talking. And by addressing it in real time, you won't get to burnout. And I think for employers, the last few years, the focus on mental well-being, it's interesting. We've talked about mental health, mental wealth, but we've not really used the word stress, but they're like opposites, aren't they? One impacts the other completely. And so I'm glad we're talking about this today, because actually a little bit of stress is good. Too much stress leads to burnout.
Yes, and it is this. It's getting the signs, but carry on. Sorry.
Yeah. The other things I've seen and sort of talk to clients about, people find it difficult to switch off and relax.
Yeah.
They start to drink more, some people, or they stop taking care of themselves. They actually, don't want to shower. And this is, again, probably going towards the sort of more burnout level. But it's I
think I'm just going to interrupt there because I think you've hit something really important. Again, we talk about this on our time management courses more than anything, more than any of our other courses, is that the things that nurture us are the things that we often jettison first. When we're feeling under stress, we kind of focus on work and we've got to get through that because that's the most important thing. And we forget the long walk, or the phoning a friend, or having a cup of tea with a neighbor, or, going to a spa, or having your nails done, or whatever it might be that, meeting up at the pub. All the things that help relieve some of that are often the first things we get rid of.
Yeah. And it's interesting, we talk about where stress comes from and how we can support our people in that. That's the next area of conversation that I'd like to lead us to. Coping methods, how to support your team. Well, what I would say straight away is, when you are creating and cultivating a group of people, is think about who you want in that team. Because if you have a group of people that aren't aligned in culture, aren't aligned in what they value and what they would give to the team and the organization and expect from the team and the organization, you're going to have a hugely stressful environment. So first and foremost, and obviously this comes to what we start with, is the hiring. Really think about your culture, your values. What's the framework? What are the stories that make you you as an organization? What are the people's journeys and stories? And celebrate those, you know, and don't just celebrate the work results, celebrate people. We used to have this thing, and we do it now. We have not only business goals, but personal goals. So your 6-month goal, your 12-month goal, and your 5-year goal, and how you're achieving that. And we would shout out for people achieving their personal goals, not just their business goals, to acknowledge people as whole, holistic support for our people. I think that's really important. And part of coping is giving people permission to speak up, that, hey, I'm feeling this.
Yeah.
You know?
It's very interesting. So I have to give a shout out to the main group, because right now, as we are having this, 2 members of our team, 3, I think, are talking to our shortlist candidates. But we did first, what you were just talking about, we had a long list and we had chemistry meetings. And it was a chance for us to have that. Are you going to fit in with the ethos of the organization? Are we reflective of what your personal ethos is? Yeah. And from that, it was like, yeah, we can now whittle it down to a short list.
Yeah.
And hopefully we'll get someone today. Yeah. But I think there is something around a culture of generosity. Now, that's very much where Impact Factory comes from. Yeah. And I know that sometimes people don't work in have the environment where that is overall, but you can have it within your team. Yeah. You can have an ethos of generosity, of humanity, of looking after each other, of kindness, of noticing, rather than, oh, where did they go? Oh, are they off sick? Oh, I didn't know.
Yeah.
And I have worked in places like that. So I know that it was like the antipathy I felt in working in environments that were cold, very old-fashioned, very patriarchal, and I'm not just talking about male, but that patriarchal mindset. Yeah. So to have much more of a place where we are looking after each other, I think is the right environment. If you don't have it overall, have it in your team.
Yeah, indeed. That's so true, that it really should come from the top. It should be in the DNA of an organization, but if it isn't, you can still cultivate that in your own team. And I would say, having, as you said, that environment of generosity and kindness, and then on the flip side, in the workspace, is have an environment of clarity, of communication, of greatness, of openness. Because again, these are the things that allow people that if they're not sure, if they're struggling, if something isn't working, they can come to you. They can, they can address it and come up with another solution, because there's always a solution. And I think stress comes when people can sometimes get lost in their own mind and can't get to the solution. And that's when brainstorming with somebody helps, or bouncing off a manager or something like that,
It is I know people didn't choose miscommunication, but
it's going up there now, actually.
Miscommunication
is now 13%. Yeah.
The way we're sometimes frightened to communicate that we're having a bad time. And that, again, is the environment of the organization. But also, having been there myself in the old days of being a perfectionist, I didn't want to admit that I was suffering. I didn't want to admit that I was perhaps under too much stress. I didn't want to admit that maybe I had taken on just one more project too much, or not set a clear boundary. So I think it's a two-way thing. It's not only hoping that your employer is going to set clear expectations, but it's also what we do to ourselves. And I was very hard on myself. I was really almost cruel, I have to say. Why did you do that voice, that pointy voice in my head that took a long time for me to get rid of?
I still have that voice. Yeah, I'm very hard on myself. And once or twice I've actually spoken to myself like I'd speak to a friend, and, it makes me feel better because the brain doesn't know whether that's an external voice or me telling myself. The brain and the body physiologically go through that same thing of bit of calm. And really, really good question from Vicky in the chat box. How do stressed people support stressed people? Like, this is gold. And I tell you why, because usually if there's an environment of stress, it's because there's nowhere for the stress to go, because everyone's looking. So, I mean, I think this is a bit like the analogy of the airplane when they say put the oxygen tank on the oxygen mask on yourself first. It's about leading by example. And I think it's about putting structures in place. Look at the pandemic, a prime example of when bosses and managers were encouraged to say, do you know what? I'm feeling a bit stressed out today, and I'm feeling a bit anxious about this. And tell me about you. And all of a sudden, talking about our mental well-being became the norm. And I would say, as a starting point, practice what you preach. Set up the environment and structure, and we can talk about a few things that we think are good to put in a workplace. But what else would you add to that, Jo Ellen?
Well, it's very interesting. I think that one of the dangers of stressed people, supporting stressed people, is it becomes sort of a complaining arena of forum to just say, yeah. However, I do think that there is something very, it's not encouraging. It's sort of relieving to know that we are in the same boat right now. And maybe we can find a way that your stress might be slightly different from mine.
Yeah.
And therefore my being able to offload to you what's going on for me, and you offloading to me what's going on to me. It's a little bit like co-counseling. And I do think that we might together find solutions for each other, or if not solutions, just to know we're going to keep an eye on. Did you take that lunch break that you said you were going to? Did you go out for a walk? I've been counseling somebody who mostly works from home, and she's in that she gets very stressed very easily, and she's in that I have to be at my computer the entire day. And I said, would you be doing that in the workplace? And she said, no. I said, you need to start. I said, what do you like doing? And she said, oh, I like playing fantasy games. I said, you need to take a half-hour break and just get away from your desk, sit in another room and play a game for a half hour. And when we were talking recently, she said it's made such a difference because she felt so badly about the expectation that she put on herself. So I do think that there are ways when you do this together that actually you can find a way through.
Yeah. And if together is hard, have a designated mental health support, a first aider, somebody or a hotline that everyone has access to. Employee assistance programs are really cost effective, and knowing that there's somebody at the end of the phone. If you provide private health to your people, there should be a phone number which enables employees who are covered to pick up the phone and talk to somebody about what they're going through. If the environment internally is too much for you as a stressed person, to support that stressed person. But I think if we're in an environment where everyone is feeling it, I think let's start putting some good practices into place, right? Let's make sure we've got people who, when they're on holiday, take that as holiday. They're not checking their emails. They're not pretending to work. They are working, but they're doing it because they're presenteeism. Let's show from the top. If I'm on holiday, that's holiday, because that's when you replenish the tank and you create that space within. Same with evenings, emails. Create a policy. Unless I pick up the phone in an emergency, you don't need to reply to me. You don't need to, let's agree amongst ourselves that's where we're going. Revisiting expectations, deadlines. There's always room for movement. Always.
Yeah, there really is. I mean, yes, some of us have work where the curtain goes up. I mean, that's life. I run a training company. So, it's the way the training, it has to happen. But pretty much everything else, you can find some flexibility. And I think for me, that's my main word, is how flexible can we be? And also, maybe we need to change our idea of what productivity is, what productivity looks like. Yeah. I think, again, we've grown up for almost like a 1950s paradigm of everybody at their desk. And I was watching something the other day with a typing pool. I mean, movie or something with it with people, and I went, oh, remember typing pools, and it was like, and then everyone took the break at the same time, and everybody left, took lunch hour at the same time.
So regimented.
It's regimented. It also is asking too much of the body.
Yeah,
that was, and I know I've mentioned that before. We're bowing down to the great, God, boss, and the corporation. There was a book called The Organization Man that I remember reading in my teens. That was just, the kind of horror of creating that paradigm. But with some of us are still living with that, and some in the environment. So around flexibility, I keep coming back to the word humanity. We are human beings first. And work people second.
Yeah, the human beings, not doings, as I've heard people say. And I guess that's in a working environment. Let's create the lunch break as a non-negotiable. Might not have to be an hour; it could be 30 minutes. Let's say, listen, have a change of scenario, have a change of environment. Get out of this office space. Go for a walk. Do walking meetings. I'm always thinking
walking meetings are brilliant. And or even just walking with a friend and talking about something or a colleague that's on your mind. That the walking really does kind of get your juices going in a different way.
I think the dog community are the happiest community, and I've got a dog nearly 2 years ago, so I go for these walks and everyone's saying hi, and you're like, wow, dog people are so happy. It's the walking. It's the, just being in nature and walking. It's very good. And we don't have to have a dog for that. We can just get out and go and grab a coffee, go for a walk, get some fresh air. Matilda actually has a comment, and it's quite interesting. Matilda says that we have several trained MHFAs in the house and an EAP as well. So mental health first aiders and an employee assistance program. But staff don't always use these support mechanisms. You're so right, Matilda. There are so many things that people don't use. And we offered our team the Calm app, or the Headspace app, I think it was, with stories, with learning meditation, with walking meditation, like something for everything to help with mental health. And they didn't use it. So we're trying to change it up. But what I would say is, talk about it as a solution. Like, say, if someone comes and says, I'm feeling this way, have you thought of this? Have you thought of that? I don't know. What do you think?
Part of the difficulty for me is the embarrassment we feel about looking weak or looking unable to cope. And again, it's these expectations that we have, that we think that it'll be a black mark against us if we show and say we're going through a really hard time. I won't get that promotion that I'm looking for, or that raise, because they'll have seen that I'm too vulnerable or too volatile. And that's this thing that needs to shift internally for yourself. And also, I'm going to be brutal here. Do you want to be in an environment where that's the only option, is to hide all this from yourself and your colleagues? Yes, of course, we want people to be productive and active and get things done, but not at the cost. And I think that to me is what's changed over the last 2 years incredibly. I mean, we had this environment beforehand, but even more so now, because people have been so vulnerable, or they've lost someone close to them, during the COVID epidemic. And as you said, you lost your mother recently, where we that kind of thing wouldn't have been talked about in the workplace before. It would have been, a little bit icky.
Yeah.
That's all changing now. And we don't want to lose that openness.
No.
So it is around, how do you let people know that it's all right to be vulnerable. It's all right to say, I'm going through a tough time.
Yeah. And I think a really good thing you could do, Matilda, is get the mental health first aider to come and do a talk, whether it's a group at a time or whether it's the whole team. That depends on the size of your organization. And likewise with the employee assistance program, people say to them, look, we're paying a lot of money for this. We want it to work. We want it to add value. Can you come and do a talk about how you help people, maybe some case studies, something to bring it to life? Because I know, companies try and do everything, but a lot of people, they forget that it goes in their top drawer, or the numbers somewhere. So maybe put a sticker, get everyone to have the number on their computer, or have it on the screensaver. You know, there's so many ways. You could have a week, like this is National Stress Awareness Month. You could say, right, first week in May, we're going to have, you know, we're going to allocate a time for everyone to call EAP or have a session with mental health first aider. You can do themes, I guess, is what I'm saying. Themes,
yes, yeah.
You know,
I mean, I know that they're doing for mental health awareness, which is May. Anxiety is one of the themes about, you know, and so, okay, anxiety and stress there go hand in hand.
Yeah.
I do think that the idea of themes also, companies that invest in a mental health first aid or a EAP is because they recognize how important it is. That, I mean, yes, there might be some doing it for lip service, but you're not going to invest all that time and money just on the real genuine desire to take care of people.
Yeah. And, you know, really obvious things like not reaching for the alcohol, not, you know, encouraging drinks nights, but maybe encouraging fruit bowls, you know, having lots of water, lots of soft drinks, fresh air, all the things that we know are bad for us can increase the stress in us, actually.
Yeah.
They don't, you know, all those free radicals start getting stuck inside and the body stops working. The brain
to prison. Those free radicals go to prison.
Yeah.
That's what we have to do.
Yeah. So resilience. Now, when we talk about stress and then we talk about the tools for resilience. It's almost like, in my mind, I'm thinking, does that mean that I have to have stress, but I just need to be more resilient? Is it like that? More stress, more resilience, more stress, more resilience? Like,
for me, I think it goes back to how am I taking care of myself? My resilience grows if I really do look after myself. My resilience diminishes when I don't. It's really, I mean, there are things you can do to build your resilience, but for me, the key is, what do I get rid of when I'm under stress that really would help me?
Yeah.
And because I know my stress pots, I know what happens to me. It's taken me a long time to recognize that point, you know, the point before the point is the point before the point of where things overspill. Yeah. So today was a very good example. We had, you know, the emergency plumber showing up at 8 this morning. So I canceled my 9:30 meeting, which, by the way, I had forgotten I had in the midst of it. But I just said, I can't do this meeting. And I didn't do it that inside. I said, I can't do this meeting. So the meeting got canceled or postponed. And I think that knowing that just having that extra bit of stress, get rid of something. Yeah. You know, just don't try to do it all. And that was the biggest lesson for me, is I don't have to do it all.
Yeah. It's interesting. We talk about resilience and stress. And I've realized at that time I needed between, you know, sort of tying everything up with my mum's funeral and coming back to work, it was my resilience. I had zero resilience. Every small thing made my pot boil because I already had all this stress and challenge of what I was dealing with in life. And so I think it's really important for organizations to recognize that actually stress in a workplace can also come from stressful things happening at home. And again, go back to asking your teams in your one-to-ones or in a session or, you know, on a walk, whatever you're doing, how are you? What's going on in your world? Because they will start opening up. And if you open up a bit, they'll open up a bit, and you'll have the whole picture. It's like trying to do a jigsaw without having that box with the photo. It's so hard to do that jigsaw because you don't know what you're looking at. But if you've got an employee and you see their world, when you start to see pieces move, you understand where it's fitting and you can be more helpful to them. We've got a question here from Taylor, a very good question. Any ideas how we can encourage mostly male operational department to embrace well-being? Wow.
That's very, very interesting. Again, because we go back to kind of the old-fashioned mindset, is find out what gives people joy. If it's talking about football, I know I'm being, you know, putting people in boxes here. It is finding out what that spark. I mean, I know what my spark is, or sparks, because there are many.
Yeah.
And talking about it or having that is the way in. Is the way in. It's not like, okay, now you have to have well-being and this is how you do it. It's find out what turns people on, what excites them, what gives them energy, and then say, all right, well, when you're feeling stressed, maybe something else has to happen. That's the way in to have the conversation rather than people feeling lectured to, because it's, again, I was talking to someone recently in a very male environment, and the embarrassment level was even higher to admit that there was a problem. And it just took one person to have the courage to say it. And then it was like dominoes.
Everyone. And that's, I also think you've got to be smart about it. Create environments where you say, you know what, we're doing a poll. What are your triggers? What gets your blood boiling? When do you notice you're feeling, like there's too much on your plate? Because I do feel that sometimes, rather than saying, hey, we're going to talk about stress now, we're going to talk about your feelings, people retract. The word, that's the brain fog there, retract. They pull back. I'll keep it simple. They pull back. But if we talk about, hey, just want to understand, like, if you're grading from 1 to 5, what bits of your work you enjoy the most or less, that all of a sudden they say, well, why do you enjoy that? Why don't you enjoy that? And all of a sudden they're telling you, and you're picking up the answers to what's stressing people out. So sometimes it's not framing this as mental health.
No, we did that recently. I mean, I wasn't at the home team meeting, but they did sort of, where are you in your job on a scale of 1 to 10? And the people who weren't at this end, okay, now let's look at why that is, what's either causing the stress or causing the log jam, something that we can fix. It's not quite the right word, but
something that can sometimes giving a solution to one thing, and having brainstorms, that everyone bring one challenge that they're facing right now and we'll all talk through it. And then again, if you have a manager or a leader whose role it is to open up about feelings and stressful environments and what's bothering them, then again, it allows other people to feel comfortable in that space. But it does require somebody who understands the benefit, because for Jo Ellen, the statistics, 79% of people are affected by work-related stress. 17 million working days a year are lost globally. Stress is the 50% of all illness is stress for people when they take time off. And that is just going up and up and up. So it could never just be lip service, because it's costing people, businesses, it's costing everyone. There's no upside to not dealing with this. So well done to everyone who's signed up, who's watching this afterwards, who wants to go back and make a difference. Jo Ellen, we've only got a few minutes left. I always say this, we need to do another session on this. We will. And I think we should probably do a session on burnout in particular as well, because something for us at the main group that we've started to put together is, when we bring somebody into an organization, hopefully we'll be doing that for you very soon, we don't just place somebody into a job. We talk to our clients about what's their induction experience going to be like. Who are the people they're going to work with? How are they going to feel after 3 months? What is their 6-month plan going to look like? And then we talk about road mapping, because I think where there's lack of clarity or confusion, where people don't feel aligned, or where they had an expectation that wasn't fulfilled, stress, discontent, uncomfortableness, trust and confidence, all goes out the window. Stress goes up. You get nothing from that person. So really, if we're going to create environments where stress is on the down, it's how you start. And the best time was when people started in a company, but the next best time is now. We clarify everything. Have that chat, be open, give them an outline of where the organization is going. Because sometimes what might stress one person wouldn't stress another.
Absolutely. I mean, that I think is the key thing, is that what stresses me, I don't do that much public speaking, but if you ask someone to do public speaking, that used to be me. If I nope, that's fine. Put me in front of an audience, I'll be okay. So it's understanding your own stress level is certainly it. But I think what you've just said, the best time is now, because this is the only time. And weigh and measure. My keeping my mouth shut what is it going to do to me? What's the cost versus the courage it might take to say to somebody, I'm feeling stressed. This is too much. There are too many demands. I haven't been able to set the boundaries that are needed. I need more support. And that courage, someone once told me their definition of courage, which I hold on to like that, which is confidence is when, courage is when, so the need to do outweighs the need not to do. So if my fear is outweighing my need to do it, then I'm going to stay stressed. But if my need to let you know and needs the support outweighs my need not to do, I'm in a much better place.
So being bold and being open and trusting the people around you are going to hold your space safely while you're able to talk about your stress.
And if they're not, it's finding somebody, it may not be the entire organization, but, if you're here, it's because you care. If you come to this webinar, it's because you care about your own health and your colleagues' health. Yeah. So that's your starting point. You've already started from a humane place.
Yeah. And I think, we're just going to tie up quickly with talking about how we create a wellbeing culture. Let's start with some polls, some check-ins. How are you doing today? Give me your score out of 1 to 5. You know how you get the sad to happy and then you get all the ones in between? Send that a text poll. They don't cost a lot. They'll get you lots of information, understanding who and what the feel of the place is. Break it down into teams. Have little group sessions on what, where people are, what they feel like. It's something that has to be ingrained in the framework of an organization. And if you're in a position of being an employee, take it to your manager, because if you're feeling it, everyone else is as well, in some shape, form, or size. Highlighting it is going to help the organization. If you've got an open mindset, a growth mindset organization, they'll be like, thank you so much for bringing that to my attention. Let me see what I can do with that. And so on. And if you're an employer and you've started to put things in place that people aren't taking them, then yes, have those sessions, or send a couple of people on. So we do this quarterly wellbeing sessions, and some of them are really normal, like massages and facials. Others are pretty wacky, and that's not wacky, that's not fair, but like Reiki or a reading or tarot, or because everyone finds their answers to their challenges in a different space, in a different way. And what we just say to people is, you've got an allowance, use it that's in a way that's going to give you a boost, to reduce your stress, to make you feel valued, to make you feel better overall. And actually, some people said we want gym passes, so we thought, right, for some people maybe we'll do gym passes instead. That's something that's coming up. So we're doing a work from home week, so we're letting everyone choose a week when it's not flexible working, but they might be working from Croydon, Purley, or Spain or Greece, like you're going. But that week is not taken out of holiday. It's just a week when they can place themselves wherever they want to. Yeah. Excuse me. So there's lots of inexpensive tools and solutions to be able to create well-being, as well as the paid for options as well. So, as I said, Jo Ellen, I'm going to actually ask you for the last thought of today before I tie up. What would be?
Okay, so my very, very last thing, which is something that we often ignore, is just acknowledging, giving your appreciation to the people around you, to the people on your team. Acknowledge the day-to-day, because sometimes we feel as though we're not seen. And if you are a boss or a colleague and you see that someone has done not above and beyond, but just did something well, or got something finished, it costs nothing. Yeah. Costs nothing. And actually, when you feel seen, you don't. It just is one less thing to feel stressed about.
Yeah, that's nice.
So that would be my kind of, because I think we're, I know I love doing it anyway. I love noticing that someone's done something and letting them know. So.
Lovely. Well, Jo Ellen, thank you very much for being on this journey with me today. My first webinar back. It's been a pleasure, and it's been great for me. I've refreshed on so much, learning so much. Hopefully everyone here has taken some value away that they can apply in their world. And remember, you can reach out to us. So you're going to get a recording of today's session of the main event later today. We'll have both mine and Jo Ellen's contact details there if you want to reach out. I'm also on LinkedIn, so you can follow me there. Jo Ellen is too. And watch this space for further main events, further webinars. They're going to be most Wednesdays at midday, and really useful topics that are going to give you and your people success and happiness in the workplace. So that's it from us. Jo Ellen, thank you so much. I'll say bye for now. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.
Cheers.